So 7 specific suggestions to negotiate the best leases possible for yourself when you're looking to find a commercial space for your business. Number 1, never have just one space that you fall in love with. It's going to be very tempting that you find the perfect, and I'm going to put perfect in quotation marks, location. But you always need to have a couple of backups there, because if you're negotiating just on one space, then fear of loss is going to cause you to negotiate from a very weak position. So always have multiple options available. Currently, with our current market conditions in most areas of the country, you know what? This is definitely a buyer's market. This is a time for you as a renter of a commercial space that you have all the advantages on your side. Quick example to that. In North Carolina, I have 4 office buildings. On one of them right now, our current tenants have been coming back to us for the last 2 years, negotiating some pretty major concessions so that we wouldn't lose them, just because our rents from that market space have gone down by about 50% for that building. And we're not atypical. We're pretty standard for most areas of the country. I'm sure if you've been walking around local retail malls, you've seen lots of stores that are empty. And it's just the fact of what's happened with the economy. Now, we're starting to strengthen up in many areas. A lot of retail sectors are starting to do stronger, but still there are a lot of landlords who are willing to make concessions right now that they wouldn't before. But it's only going to happen if, number 1, you make sure that you have more than one option. Second point to negotiate the best lease possible is you might not be the best person to do that. Right now, there's a huge number of commercial real estate brokers that have been forced out of business because there has not been much sales activity. And many of them have, in desperation, started to become managing the leasing agent for tenants, where they will basically act as your representative to negotiate the best lease possible on your behalf. They'll be your agent. And when you look at that, that doesn't cost you anything, because the cost for their commission is going to be paid by the landlord. Now, the landlord, we don't like that. But when we want a tenant badly enough, we're going to go ahead and let that happen. And so I think I would suggest for any of you who are looking for a commercial space right now, unless you're a really strong negotiator with some good skills and also with knowledge about commercial real estate, it's easy right now to find a broker who would want to represent you, even if you're only going to ask them to help you find a space for a small building. Generally, you're going to want someone who's accredited by one of the Institute of Real Estate Managements or one of these other accreditations, or someone who's got at least 5 years experience in that marketplace, ideally on the leasing side of things, not just someone who sells buildings. That's pretty important. A lot of real estate agents say that they've got experience, but they might really not do much in the way of it. So find out what activity they've got. You want someone who's good to represent you. And you might want to interview a couple of different people. Check referral sources. Check their people that they give you as references. And I tell you what, the right real estate agent who is a broker who represents you as your leasing agent can mean a lot. Why? Example, right now we're negotiating 2 lease renewals with 2 of our tenants over at one of our buildings. They both have a real estate broker who's representing them. Not only am I going to have to pay for the commission for this person, but this person knows the real estate market, so it's really hard for me to negotiate with somebody and say, hey, we think that you should be paying $10 more per square foot, because they're going to come back and say, well, we can go across the street, not only can get lower rents than you're offering, but we can get premium placement of a sign that's out front and blah, 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 blah. So my suggestion is get a great broker who knows the area, has got some experience. They will be worth their weight in gold. Plus, they're free to you. I'd be careful about signing an exclusive relationship with them. Let them know that if you do sign the exclusive, that you want the right to cancel if you're not happy with what they're bringing you. They find you a great space, you're happy to go ahead and have them represent you. But you want to be careful that if they're not doing a good job, that you're not locked in with that. Third tip to negotiate the best lease possible there is to look at the real picture of cost. Not just the dollar per square foot per year that you're paying, but you've also got to look at what kinds of costs or utilities are they trying to pass on to you. As a landlord, here's how I try to sneak expenses back over to my tenants. And I'm teasing, right? Just because I say sneak, it's not sneak. It's perfectly normal and acceptable in the industry. But I try to pass over expenses like I want to have a triple net lease if I can as a landlord. I want you to pay me rent, but be responsible for all of the expenses, including taxes, insurances, and so forth, utilities. You as a tenant want to look at what are all the costs, so you compare apples to apples, not just lease rate to lease rate, where one's a triple net lease and the other one might not be. Also be aware of what they call core function of the building. A lot of building owners will try to pass on to you a percentage of the building expenses that are what they call core functionality. The staircases, the elevator shafts, the lobby of the foyer of the first floor, dead space that we normally can't get rent for, we try to pass a proportional amount of that expense over to you. And in this marketplace, I would make the claim that if you're negotiating well, you should be responsible probably for zero of that core space. Another area for you to look at right now in terms of cost and ways we try to put that back over is oftentimes, if it's a retail space, we might even try to negotiate for a percentage of a premium based off of register sales or other things. So be careful what the real costs are. The fourth secret I would share with you to negotiate a better lease rate, right now, a lot of landlords don't like to make concessions by rent. And the reason for that is it hurts our valuations on the property, which kills us when we talk to our lenders. So if I were renting to you for $10 a square foot versus $20 a square foot I want to get, I'm just making these numbers up here, by the way. What that means to me is that when my lender looks at that building, I might very well not have enough equity. My lender might come back to me and say, hey, David, you need to put more cash in this property because we've dropped below the loan to value or the debt service ratio that we need to be. Or if I need to refinance that loan, they're going to give me a real hassle with that. So I might very well be willing to give you money, but I don't want to have a lower lease rate on the books. So instead I might go ahead and say, oh great, we'll give you $20 per square foot, but we'll give you 1 year free rent, which functionally gives you what you want, but still lets me as a landlord protect myself with my lenders or my ability to refinance that property. Other concessions you can ask for are for them to take and own more of the expenses. Or perhaps you can negotiate for them to give you really good tenant improvements, which we're going to talk about next anyways. So get that sometimes for the owner of the building, they really need to protect their price per square foot on the lease rates because of their lenders or their need to refinance. But maybe you can get the same thing back and just call it something different, which gives them a victory on paper, but gives you a victory in your pocketbook. Fifth secret to negotiating a great lease rate. And this is really important, which is the tenant improvement side. Tenant improvements are fixes to the building before you move in. Generally, in a very weak market real estate-wise, like we're in right now, the landlord's going to have to give you some really good build-outs. They're going to have to be willing to spend some money to make the building look like what you want it to be. If you're opening up a coffee shop, those build-outs become really important to you because you might have to do some major changes to that inside interior to make it look like what you want, unless it already had a great other cafe in the place before. If you're renting an office space, you might want to change the way the floor plan of that is by putting in sub areas or replacing the carpet or other things that you might want. So now is a time to really negotiate strong on that part. And the thing with the tenant improvements, though, is you almost always would prefer a better lease rate over just great tenant improvements generally. And the reason for that is because your lease is going to have to be paid over a longer time. And the tenant improvements are usually a one-time occurrence. So be aware of that. Now that said, tenant improvements usually are money that you put up front, so it has a high value that way. Number 6, the sixth secret I would share with you about getting a good lease right now would be that right now is the time to negotiate for those extras. For example, how many parking spaces are dedicated to just you, the ones right in front of your thing? How about signage? Can you ask for premium signage that you want? If there's another tenant that's in that shopping center or strip mall or office building that is important for them to stay there because they bring business into you, then you might want to put in your lease that they're going to agree that if, in fact, that tenant moves out, that you have the right to either break the lease or you get a reduction in your rent or something of that nature. The converse is also true. Let's say, for example, you're opening up a coffee shop. You certainly don't want them putting in another coffee shop that's going to compete with you in that same area. So you might want to negotiate in your lease that says they're not going to put a competitive business to yours in there. Again, this is why working with a really good real estate broker that represents you, the leasee, is that right? Yeah, the leasee, the person doing the renting on that commercial space, is very useful because they'll know about these things. And then the final one for you that I would share with you is when you're dealing with someone on a real estate lease, anything that's said out loud has to be reflected in the final written agreement, because anything that they say means nothing unless it's in writing, clearly looked at, and you might want to even have your attorney review it. You'd be shocked at the number of things that people have promised clients of ours in terms of leases or in terms of other business arrangements, and it wasn't worth the paper it wasn't written on. So there you have 7 specific ideas to negotiate a better lease for yourself.